I just realised I think it's becoming my thing to have a different drink in every video that I do. This is a super berry tea. It's really nice. I just needed something warm. It's actually really cold today even though it's sunny, but I refuse to wear my jumpers. I'm wearing a summer dress. I don't care. Hello and welcome to my little bookish corner of the internet. My name's Harriet. Today I'm going to be doing a review of a trilogy that I do not hear enough people talk about, and that is the Annals of the Western Shore trilogy by Ursula Le Guin. If you've seen my Earthsea video, or to be honest any video where I talk about books, you will know she is one of my favourite authors. I have only read her fantasy books so far, and this is a fantasy trilogy that I'll be talking about today. But she is well known for her science fiction books, and I believe she also has a Greek mythology book out too that I really want to read. So yeah, let's talk about this trilogy and hopefully I can convince you to read it, give it a go and see if you like it. With this trilogy, I originally thought that it was going to be a children's series, but I do believe for sure that it is a young adult series. There is a lot of violence in here and a lot of hard topics that are discussed, but I wouldn't say it's adult, although as an adult, I am 23 this year. I still enjoyed it and it didn't feel like childish or anything like that, but I would say it is young adult. I would also like to point out that there are some trigger warnings in here, so they do talk about rape, death, slavery, and there is a lot of violence in this trilogy as well, so just keep that in mind. Maybe look up the trigger warnings first before you read them if you're worried about them. So let's get started. So the first book is Gifts, and this novel introduces us to a world where various different people have inherited gifts. They're kind of like magical powers, and they are passed on through generation after generation, so they're inherited through family genes. But it's not the kind of magic where you have to wave a wand and say special words. It varies depending on the gift that a certain person has, how they would use it. So some of them do say a word, some of them just have to think or point a finger. But we are following the story through the point of view of a young boy called Auric, and his power is the power of undoing, which basically means that he can undo any person, animal, or even plants in nature, and they essentially fall to nothing. For example, if you were to undo a person, all of their organs would kind of disappear and turn to dust, and there'd just be this big lump on the floor. It's pretty gross. But we are following him as he struggles to come into his power. He also has the pressure from his extremely powerful father, but not only does he have to deal with that, he has to deal with his feelings towards his friend that he grew up with, and her name is Gry. Now Gry, because she's obviously born into a different family, has a different gift, and that is the gift of calling. More specifically, the gift of calling to animals, so she can get them to obey her, listen to her, and come to her. But she doesn't want to use this power in the way that her family wants her to. Her family, for generations, has called animals to the hunt, which essentially is tricking them to come to them so that they can slaughter them and eat them. Yeah, obvious reason why she doesn't want to follow through with that. But we are following these two characters as they both equally battle with family expectations and also the expectations of the society around them. Obviously these powers and gifts have been about for, like I say, generations and generations. So everyone's kind of set in their own ways, and the small community that they live in relies on them doing these things, using their powers for life to go on, for them to eat and look after their land and their animals. I won't say too much more about the plot, but there are different communities in this novel, so different places with different people and different powers, and there is quite a bit of tension between a couple of these places, so there's a little bit of political intrigue in this novel, which is good because that set me up for reading Game of Thrones, but that is a different video. The main thing that I loved about this is not only that obviously it's extremely inventive, but also Ursula Le Guin is fantastic at writing really believable and realistic characters. Even if they're flawed, you just can't help but love them. She is a fantastic writer, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to read any of her books. Things are kind of left ambiguous throughout this novel though, so you don't learn a whole lot about the lore and the different lands and the people that live there, apart from a select few. But as the series goes on, you definitely do learn a lot more about them. I'm so sorry if the camera moved just then. The tripod is not having it today. It's slipping and sliding all over the place, so I've like propped it up on a little pencil holder, so hopefully it stays put. Yeah, I love this book. I thought it was great. The characters are fantastic. It was really sad. I cried, of course I did. And I also finished it in under 24 hours, so it was great. It was a 5-star read, of course. Next up was Voices, so that is the second book in the trilogy, and this gave me really similar vibes to the second Earthsea novel, which is called The Tombs of Atuan, and the main character Tenar. The two books have got similar themes of religion, cultism, and they both follow a girl who is unsure of who she is and what she is contributing to society, and also why her society is the way that it is. The girl in this story, Voices, her name is Murmur, and she's living in a town of Annals, although I pictured it more of a city. I'm not sure why. It's described as being quite grand compared to the first book, so I think I just imagined it to be like this huge city, but it is described as a town. And in this town, an army has taken over and destroyed all of the books, as well as any written work and libraries and places that store the books, because essentially they believe that to write down and record the words that are spoken by their god and that are given to them by their god is to do the devil's work. So those words and stories and things shouldn't be recorded. However, in the house that Myrma lives in, there is a secret place that can only be accessed by using a certain gift, although Myrma doesn't realise that it's a gift to start with. And in this secret place is where the books are kept, basically. So whatever is left after the armies took their books is in the secret place. And that's kind of the start of the story, and then it gets a lot more interesting. There's a lot more political intrigue, and we do get reintroduced to the characters in the first book, which was really fun. I find that Ursula Le Guin loves to do that with her fantasy series. Obviously I've only read Earthsea before this one, but that was quite similar in that the characters do overlap eventually, even if you don't think they're going to. This book had a lot more political intrigue in there and much more violence, so just be aware of that before going into it. This was a far more intense read. It wasn't as emotional as the first, and I would say it's a lot more plot driven as opposed to character driven like the first book. But you do get a lot more background of the world that we are in, and yet more fantastic character development, because of course there is. Again, this was a 5-star read. It was a very quick and very rich story. And then the third and final novel, which I would say is definitely the darkest of the three, is called Powers. This was a really hard read. If you saw my latest reading vlog, you will have kind of seen a reaction from me, because I was reading this at the time. Basically, we are following a young slave whose name is Gavir, although most people call him Gav, and he has the power to see into the future, almost as if he is remembering the scenes that are playing in his head, but he doesn't really know what this power means. In fact, he's not even sure if it is a power, because the place where he is in this world doesn't really have that. You have the Highlanders, which are the ones that have the powers, and then you have the Lowlanders, which are the ones that don't. So they don't really mix with each other. But because Gav's mother died really young, he was never really sure who he was. He wouldn't have known that he'd inherited these gifts. Not only can he remember the future, he can also memorise stories and poems and events that have happened, so he's got a really good memory. And he lives with multiple other slaves, but also lives with his sister Sallow, and they have a fantastic relationship, a really strong bond. Obviously they only really grew up with each other, so they are quite closely knit. But because he is living with these other slaves, there is a lot of bullying and violence in the start of the book. Because the slaves are all kept together, they don't all get on, and there's no way to get away from each other. And the violence and tension builds up until eventually there is a siege. There are multiple events that happen between the start of the book and the siege. That's about halfway through, but I really don't want to spoil any of it because it is a roller coaster. But this siege causes Gav to flee and try and make his own way. We meet a lot of really horrible characters. You are obviously supposed to hate them, so Ursula did a really good job of writing those. But that did make it really difficult to read. Not physically read, but just in my mind. There is a lot of rape and grief and violence in this story, so please be really wary. As the trilogy goes on, it does get darker and darker. The first one isn't so bad, but this last one was really, really dark. One thing I found really difficult to read was how Gav sees his previous life as not being that bad, because he's been brought up to not think that's that bad and to think that it's normal and that it's okay for people to treat him the way that they did. But obviously, as an outsider reading it, you just want to explain to him how he deserves so much better from life, and that's not how his life should be. Yeah, it was just really difficult. But he basically accepts what happens to him and his friends and family until something really tragic happens and something in his mind just flips. And then from there, it is a crazy, crazy story. I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to ruin it, but it is a super hard-hitting story about self-discovery, loss, love, and also survival too. Ursula Le Guin does a great job of, again, just making it feel so realistic and like it really happened. It all feels very raw, but it's still entertaining to read. I didn't want to put it down. And it truly was a fantastic conclusion to the trilogy. Again, 5 stars. So it is a 5-star trilogy. I'll be really surprised. I don't know if there's ever going to be an Ursula Le Guin book that I don't love. At least I hope not. But if you like pretty soft fantasy that's mainly character driven, with lots of relationships and friendships, and again some tough topics that are a little bit dark, but not too heavy, then I really recommend this. Her writing is beautiful, but it's not too fluffy, it's not heavy, it's just perfect. So yeah, that is my review of this trilogy. I really hope that you want to check it out after watching this. I obviously strongly recommend it. I mentioned that I might do this little review in one of my videos and lots of people said they'd be interested, so hopefully if you've watched this you enjoyed it. Let me know down below if there's any series you think I should pick up that not many people talk about, especially if it's fantasy. Even science fiction, I would really like to get into that. But yeah, thank you for watching my video today. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and I will see you in my next one. Bye!